Hello everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations. I'm Simon today, and in today's video we're going to be looking at another subscriber chart reading, and we're going to be delving deep into the nature of the soul, understanding what are the core complexes and dynamics that are associated with this type of chart. And as always, when we look at the astrology chart, we're looking at what is the why behind it? Like, why this lifetime? Why these symbols? So we'll jump straight into that for us. Okay, now of course we always look at the bottom line of the chart, and for this chart over here we're seeing Pluto's in the first house and it's in the constellation Libra. Okay, so the core of the chart is that the soul has come to initiate a completely new evolutionary cycle. Okay, whenever Pluto's in the first house, it is the spontaneous experiences that leads to new dynamics, and it's about establishing a completely new way of relating to yourself. Right? It's an Aries archetype, and when you synthesize that with Pluto, what you have is this dynamic of need for freedom and a dynamic of needing to commit. And so it's commitment to experiencing yourself. It's a commitment to experiencing what impulses and desires naturally arise within inside of yourself and the actioning of that. And it's more of the actioning of those desires that leads to what the experience is like, versus more along the lines of what are these calculated understandings or calculated choices. It's a lot more about just acting on the impulse and seeing where it takes you, and then from that getting a sense of, oh, this worked or this didn't work. Although in this chart, I must admit, there are quite a lot of symbols on the actual Pluto sign itself that indicate a very specific path that the soul is working with. Now, you can see it's in Libra. Pluto's in Libra in the chart. So this is about learning about herself through another person or himself. It's, how do I meet myself in a relationship? How do I sense what's correct for me, and what do I notice what is correct for the other? So this is a type of relationship dynamic with this chart that might actually have an emotional paradox. I like to be free, yet I like to be needed, or I want to be needed, or I'd like to share my experiences. See, Libra is all about comparing and contrasting, and it's about learning about myself through the other. So the paradox lands up being, like I said, I want this freedom to experience myself, but sometimes being alone is a little bit boring, and I want to share it in a social way, right? So the Pluto first house dynamic is interesting. And then when you look at the energy of the Pluto in the chart, it's conditioned by Venus. Why? Because Libra and Venus are playing with each other. They're basically conditioning the nature of how they work. So Venus is in the fifth house, Aquarius. So the context of this Pluto first house says, well, something about my creative intelligence, something about my creative pursuit, how I express myself, how do I validate my inner needs, is a big association with the Pluto here, because of the nature of Aquarius and Venus being the conditioning field and the fifth house, right? That Venus says, or should I say the Aquarius says, I want to be different. So different values around self-expression that is leading me to understand myself through relationships. That would be the synthesis within the chart over here. Okay. When we go ahead and have a look at the nodes of the moon, we can get an even deeper understanding of what this is about. Now, again, the nodes of the moon correlates to what type of, imprinting did I receive when I was growing up? What type of orientation do I have towards life? And it also supports the Plutonian story in the chart, because if you have a look, the moon's nodes are deep psychological and emotional imprinting. And Pluto is the nature of desire, right? So the paradigm of evolutionary astrology looks at the nodes of the moon, and it looks at Pluto as one archetype that is, when you split it apart, gives you the human experience and the nature of what is essentially evolving that human experience, right? So with the South Node being in the fourth house in Capricorn, this is a soul that is clearly coming into this lifetime with a family structure that had strong boundaries, and wanted to implement those boundaries. Now, they could have been implemented in a way that was, okay, this is what's correct, this is the correct way to behave, these are the rules about society, these are the rules of the home. Or it could have been along the lines of, this is the rule, you will obey. And so there's the potential with the fourth house South Node in Capricorn to have had rigid boundaries in place, which would have created emotional repression, which then would have led to the Venus in the fifth house being somebody that needed to rebel for the sake of rebelling, and also to acknowledge their own needs as something different to the community or the home, right? So when you go ahead and you actually have a look at the planetary ruler of the South Node, which the planetary ruler of the South Node in this case it's Saturn, right? Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn, just as Venus is the ruler of Libra. So what we have here is a Saturn conjunct Pluto dynamic. And this Pluto-Saturn conjunction is actually what is called in evolutionary astrology balsamic phase, meaning that it's on completion. Right? A whole entire evolutionary cycle has come before this lifetime, and the soul is literally ending this cycle of Saturnian and Plutonian dynamics. So it's actually really, really interesting to look at the relationship between the planetary ruler of the South Node, Saturn, conjunct Pluto, saying this is about deep unconscious emotional memory linked with the boundaries and the laws and the way that those were established in relationship to themselves and to the people in the home, and how that was fair or not fair. But if you have a look at the planetary ruler of the Saturn archetype and the Plutonian archetype, you see it's Venus, which is an Aquarius. So it gives a very profound layer, or a deep layer of profound understanding regarding how that could have played out. And the potential here is to either be deeply traumatized by the repression from, say, the parent or the parents, or the polarity between two parents. Maybe mom and dad defined themselves in unique ways, right? And this person came into the home and said, okay, so which person could I choose? Because again, Libra is all about extremes. So there could be two potential parents, Saturn, that are deeply disempowered or empowered, okay, that are on opposite sides of the spectrum, and they're both trying to express themselves creatively, and this soul comes into lifetime and goes, oh, is that what creative expression looks like? Or is that what creative expression looks like? Or is this the gender role? Or is this the gender role? So there can be quite a lot of confusion that could naturally arise in the psyche of the soul with those complexes, right? Those types of squares, at least. And if you have a look, both Libra, or should I say Mars, Saturn, and Pluto being in the first house, this is an energy of new cycles, like initiation of new cycles, right? Yet with Libra, it's initiating new types of relationships as well. So there's quite a lot of juiciness within the chart regarding the nature of what those symbols represent. And there's a lot of energy in the first house that reflects to the soul that they are learning about themselves through the other, and they are comparing and contrasting, and you're looking and saying, okay, that person's like this person's like this, where do I fit in? How do I fit in? Which identity do I use? And I think that's what the North Node in the 10th house Cancer is really about as well. See, if you have a look at the 10th house right at the top of the chart, you can see the North Node's there in Cancer, and its planetary ruler is the Moon, right? And that Moon is sitting in the 6th house Pisces. So we already know that Pisces is about a completion cycle, or it's a phase of completion, right? And we know that the Moon represents how we integrate this personality that we have in each moment, right? How do we meet each moment with who we see ourselves as? So the Moon is integration, and the Saturn correlates to integration within the boundaries, i.e. what is the established law within my immediate environment and then within the society, right? And how do I integrate that sense of identity into these boundaries, into these laws, into these rules? With the North Node being in the 10th house, you can see this is a clear dynamic that's trying to be actualized in this time over here. But I think with the Pluto and the Saturn being in Balsamic phase and the moon being in Pisces, it's quite complementary to say that this is about initiating completion cycles, i.e. surrendering the definitions of the past and allowing new definitions to actually arise naturally as the soul explores themselves in completely new ways. So I hope that you guys got a lot out of that conversation today. And for the subscriber chart reading, or the person that's supporting us on Patreon, I hope that you got a lot of value out of this. And I certainly had fun reading this chart. There's so much to talk about. But in terms of the time that we have available, and of course, wanting to really give the essence of this chart, I think this is a lot for the person to process and for you to see already, that is watching on YouTube and following this series. Okay. All right, my friends, have a wonderful day, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.